thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of my career and how I've sort of ended up in a research focused position. And I was recently promoted to associate professor. And I wanted to kind of talk through how that has kind of played out, and then also give you sort of my tips for, coming to a, working towards a research focused career, if that's what you want to do. And, I will just put the caveat on it that it's just sort of my tips from my experience. Everyone has their own experiences. So please don't feel that this is the be all and end all of advice. But I'll just flick through to my next slide. That's better. So just to give you a really brief overview of my research, it's not necessarily well defined within the urban area, but I think it has a lot of implications for urban design, urban planning. So I work in what we call human factors, and I apply that within transport safety. When we talk about human factors, it's about how we design things like tasks and equipment or vehicles or processes that people work with. And it's all about optimizing human performance. So we might look at things like workload, attention, decision making. But we also need to acknowledge that sort of transport occurs within a complex socio-technical system. And so I'm thinking about road systems, rail systems, aviation, maritime. And so we need to think about the interactions between people. So between road users, for example, we need to consider the interactions between humans and technology, which is a really growing area. And we need to also think about the wider systemic factors that influence people's performance and outcomes like safety. My focus is mostly around safety. And importantly as well, we need to kind of consider how these systems are dynamic and they change over time. So we can't sort of necessarily assume that knowledge at one particular point in time is going to be relevant in the future. So the current focus of my work is around the safe introduction of new technologies. And as Sylvia mentioned, I hold a DECRA Fellowship, which is an Australian Research Council grant, which basically funds you for 3 years to work on your particular research focus. And I've been looking at autonomous vehicles and how we introduce autonomous vehicles into the road system safely. I'm happy to talk more about that if people have questions, but I was actually going to move on to talk a little bit about sort of my career and how I got to this point. And it's kind of interesting because it wasn't necessarily a planned career, which I think is probably the case for most people. So when I sort of started out, so 2001, selecting bachelor's courses and things, I did a Bachelor of Law and Bachelor of Behavioural Science double degree. And really I wanted to be a criminal defence lawyer. That was my grand plan. I was really into forensic psychology and things like that. So I really enjoyed the psychology side and the legal side. But when I came out of that program, I'd done some placements and I'd sort of had some experience with legal work, and it wasn't really a good fit for me. And I found that actually I wanted to go into the Victorian Government graduate program. I was down in Victoria at the time, and they offer, these great 12-month programs in government where you learn all these skills around policy development, project management, things like that, and you get placed in different areas of government. So I got some really great experience doing that. And out of that, I got a job in 2007 as in the human factors world, which I didn't know much about when I got the job, but it was with the transport safety regulator. So it kind of merged my interests of psychology and law together in a sort of government position. And while I was working there, so I did work there for about 9 years, I had a really great manager and mentor who really encouraged me to continue my education. So I did my 4th year of my honours in psychology, and then I started a PhD. So I went part-time and did a PhD at Monash University at the transport safety group there. And I got a really good opportunity to attend a lot of conferences while I was doing my PhD. And I also published papers, which I'll sort of talk about in a little bit. And then towards the end of my PhD, I took a job as a postdoctoral research fellow at University of the Sunshine Coast. That came about because my PhD supervisor moved to the Sunshine Coast and he got an Australian Research Council Future Fellowship with a job under it. So I was successful in getting that job, and it really gave me an opportunity to start up my research career. So I got some seed grants, some industry grants early on. I was working under some big funded projects. I actually quite early got appointed to an associate editor position with one of our journals, one of our peer-reviewed journals. And the reason that happened was quite interesting. I mentioned that I went to a lot of conferences during my PhD. I'd actually been at an international conference and the editor-in-chief of that journal had seen me present. And he was just really interested in the work I was doing. He found it quite innovative, quite new. And he told me later, he said, oh, well, that's really why I thought I'd bring you into the journal. So it was one of those sort of random events where that just sort of worked out. So it was a great opportunity. I also had the chance to lead a book, which was based on the wider project that my PhD fell under. So that was a lot of hard work, but a really good thing to have done fairly early on in my career. And I also started supervising PhD and honours students quite quickly as well, quite early on. Then in 2017, so I actually applied for the DECRA award, which I sort of mentioned, it's a competitive award from the Australian Research Council. They have quite a low success rate. So I think when I applied, there was sort of 15% success rate or something like that. So there's, a lot of hard work involved in getting it forward, but I think a bit of luck as well. But at the time I did have 19 journal articles. So I'd worked a lot with my PhD to publish, but I'd also worked with people post-PhD and had a lot of good collaborations where people involved me in publications. And around that time, I also got promoted to Senior Research Fellow. Sort of 2018, 2019 and 2020 has been involved in doing the DECRA, so working on autonomous vehicles, but also, keeping up my networking, keeping up the student supervision, continuing to work with industry and building up industry grants. 2019 is interesting. We got a really nice award from a UK society, but then we had, I led an unsuccessful linkage project grant, which was a big piece of work, but, it's a good reminder that there's not always success in this journey. That you've got to expect sometimes your grants won't get forward, but then I was lucky to be involved in a discovery project that was successful. And so 2020, last year, so just to sort of show the trajectory again, keeping on working with people, keeping collaborations going, I managed to publish 46 journal articles by 2020. But coming to the end of the DECRA, it's about sort of planning for the next fellowship. So what will I apply for next to kind of keep my position funded and keep me focused on research? And I was promoted last year to Associate Professor as well. So that's just a little bit of an overview. I did want to talk about, I guess when I was an early ECR or PhD student, I didn't really think about the different career paths, or I didn't really necessarily understand the options that were available. So I thought I'd just quickly mention these. So obviously there's the academic route, where you could be a research-focused academic. And usually we talk about 80-20. So if you hear, or 40-40-20. And really that means, 80, if you're research focused, at least at USC, 80% of your time is on research, and the other 20% of your time is on service, academic service and engagement. So things like editing journals or peer reviewing or engaging with industry or organising conferences, things like that. So that's a way you can be quite research focused and get your research happening, or you can do a teaching research position, which they call 40-40-20, which is 40% of your time teaching, 40% research, 20% on service. Both types of positions are really quite competitive to get into. One thing I've noticed, I'm not sure if this is the case everywhere, but research-focused positions tend to be contract. So you might get 12 months or 2 years or 3 years contract position because they're funded by a grant. Whereas teaching and research, you may be lucky enough to get a more permanent position fairly early. But however, teaching can take up a lot of your time. While it says 40-40-20, I think during semester time, a lot of academics who are in a teaching research position feel like it's hard to get their research going. So really, as an early postdoc, it's really nice if you can get a research focused position and really build up your research, and then maybe move to teaching research position in the future where you've got time. If you're having to develop courses and develop your research profile at the same time, it can be a lot of work. Doesn't mean that people don't do it very successfully though. Industry and government, another great option. Obviously, I came from a government background. I love my job there. And a lot of PhD graduates do end up working in non-academic roles and have really fulfilling careers doing that as well. But obviously, I'm going to be sort of talking more about academic jobs. In terms of finding a job, this is something I've kind of gathered over the years. So obviously I was lucky enough that my supervisor had a position that I could apply for, and I already had a good working relationship with them. But your supervisors also have networks. So, make sure you're getting introduced to people in your field who, your supervisor knows. Then build your own networks, obviously. So events like this are great, where people are meeting each other and kind of, you can introduce each other to more people in your field as well. Examiners is a really interesting one. So when, you know, if you're a PhD student and you're choosing examiners or working with your supervisor to choose examiners, think about who you might want to work with in the future, because it's a fantastic opportunity. They've read your thesis, they have to examine it, and you've, you know, hopefully really impressed them with your work. So it just brings that connection. Obviously, there's advertised positions that will come up. They're also great, but it's also really nice if you already have some sort of relationship with the person that you're applying for the position with. And another thing that some people will do, and I'm not sure of the success rate of doing this, but it is something that happens, is keep an eye on when grants become awarded. So the Australian Research Council and the NHMRC, the National Health and Medical Research Council, they have grant rounds and they publicly announce all the grants that go out. So you can see, okay, well, who got an ARC Future Fellowship in this round? Here's the list. These projects are relevant to my area. And some people will just cold email the chief investigator and say, I noticed I'm really interested in your grant in this area, you know, congratulations. And if there are any positions available, here's my CV and I'd be really interested to know. So that is another way you can go about it as well, sort of being quite proactive about finding positions. And I just wanted to now talk through a few tips for, you know, working your way towards a research focus career. Now I had to cut these down. I had quite a lot initially. But I guess for me, what worked really well was publications. So publishing early in my PhD as well, and I published my honours thesis as well. So I had a few publications quite early on, and then I published, I think, a total of 7 papers out of my thesis eventually, not all during the PhD time. So obviously the most important thing is to finish PhD, but if you can get publications out of it, that's a real bonus. Publishing beyond the thesis if possible while you're doing your PhD or then beyond. So making those collaborations with people who are active publishers and who will be open to collaborating with you and working with you. The third one is work hard. You know, I know everyone's working really hard, and you know we kind of have to if we want to do really well in this area. But also be aware of, I guess, exploitation. So you know, if you're working with groups or individuals and you feel like you're putting a lot of work in and you're not necessarily getting the acknowledgement of that in terms of authorship or order of authorship, just be aware of that. And, you know, there are ways you can deal with that in terms of being really upfront about authorship at the beginning, making sure everyone's aware of, you know, what kind of contribution they're going to make and what the authorship outcomes will be. But, I certainly wouldn't work with someone a second time if I felt that my kind of efforts weren't being acknowledged. So that's just something to be aware of. Sorry, I think someone's on. Great, awesome. The next one I've already mentioned is building networks. Now I know that's been a bit hard this last 12 months with conferences and everything like this being online, but do what you can to continue to build up your networks. Social media is quite good for this. Obviously these kind of groups are excellent. I find Twitter is quite useful for people who are working in my field. But yeah, just be kind of creative in the ways that you can build networks, and don't be worried about asking people if they're willing to introduce you to others. If there's someone in your field that you want to get to know, and an email between, you know, someone you know or your PhD supervisor to that person could be a way to meet them. Related to that is getting really great mentors. So I think I was blessed with having really good mentors through my career and including my academic career. These could be supervisors from your PhD, or they could be others as well. And you know, get advice from these people about career opportunities within your area, building networks, things like reviewing grant applications. So my DECRA application, I think, was reviewed by about 5 people who were very kind to give me their criticisms of it, so that it could be at the best version that it was when it went in. Nominate yourself for awards. This can be an uncomfortable thing to do, but awards are really fantastic because they can set you apart. So if you're applying for a job, you know, other people might have similar experience, similar numbers of publications, but if you've got some really nice awards on there, it can really set you apart. And there are times when, yeah, you can just nominate yourself. There are other times where you might ask someone else to nominate you, and don't be embarrassed to do that as well. You know, I've noticed this award's around, would you be willing to nominate me? That's a fine conversation to have with people. And make sure, you know, if you are doing your PhD, get involved in things like the 3-minute thesis competition and other sort of competitions where you can get awards or certificates from. Get to know about fellowship options for postdoctoral positions. So there are lots of rules and requirements around that. For example, the DECRA, you can apply for only up to 5 years post-PhD, although if you've had career interruptions, that's kind of managed within that time frame. So you can be a bit longer post-PhD if you've had interruptions. But there you can only apply for them twice in that 5-year period. And if you're unsuccessful twice, you can't apply a third time. So it's really important to kind of be a bit strategic about how you do that then. And some people wait until that very last time that they can so that they've built up enough publications and track record to do that. Be open to feedback and ongoing learning. I think this is so important. You know, sometimes you're doing a PhD and you think, oh, when I get to the end of the PhD and I've had it awarded, I'll know everything I need to know about this topic or about this area. But of course, you quickly find that there's so much more to know. And I think you'll find that everyone is continuously learning and growing and adapting, which, you know, makes it a really interesting job to do. You never want to kind of stop learning. And also, yeah, be really open to constructive feedback because, again, there's always more we can do. And I think this is a really important one, is about enjoying the sort of uncertainty and discovery of research. So if you're really enjoying you know, finding out new things, but being comfortable with that sense that we don't always know what the final output or outcome of a research project is going to be. I do find that some people find that easier to deal with than others. And that can really help you decide whether you want to be in a research-focused career, because there can be quite a bit of uncertainty around, you know, your research, the grants that are coming up, you know, potentially how your position is going to be funded into the future. So you have to be kind of open to rolling with that a little bit. And finally, you know, it's nice to be strategic towards your career goal. And that can be really important because you want to be planning, you know, a few years ahead in terms of where you want to be. But definitely, I would say always keep your options open. So don't sort of close off any options. Think broadly about your careers. And yeah, ultimately, there are many excellent, amazing careers you can do with research and with the skills and training that you have. So yeah, just wish you all the best with the future, and happy to answer any questions when we get to the panel session as well.